Hello. Now, it took me quite a while to go where I left off because basically, when I transferred, well, most of my, well, I didn't transfer most of my stuff, but I had to, it took me about 5 to 10 minutes to go where I left off. And, side of all things, well, testing it out with OBS, of course. So, let's continue recording. In contrast, far in the distance, one could see the chaotic town of Red Valley. I was impressed that they would dare come up with names like White Belt and Red Valley. As I thought about that, the train suddenly picked up a burst of speed. Along the streets below, all that could be seen were residential and commercial buildings, like a district of cold buildings. Now that we reached a height of 20 stories, we stopped being able to see the tops of buildings passing by. Beyond the glass windows, one could see the busy salarymen as electronic billboards started to flood the view. Before long, as if the train went right into a thick forest, we were covered in shadows, and vision was reduced greatly for a moment. The train continued to navigate through groups of nearby buildings by going around them. Then, suddenly, my vision cleared up again. Interesting. This was the large plaza before the Dune City Central Station. The vastness of the gigantic atrium would amaze not only travelers from Earth but even those raised on the moon. At 162 meters above ground, nanowires held up a massive clock and hologram screen right in midair. The train continued along the side of the large plaza and was eventually swallowed up within the terminal station. It, like Lunar City, can be considered a gathering at the highest levels of wealth and honor for mankind. I got off the train and counted the number of advertisements that came into view. There were three from nanotech companies, four from major software corporations, two from biotech firms, two from insurance companies, and six from the banks. Wow, this is a nice looking view. And then there were five from investment banks. Each and every one of them was famous for their rate of earnings and prideful of their proceeds, and they had the task of sweeping up all the proceeds from the wealth on Earth and pumping it into this lunar city. Listing the world's companies in order of market cap within the top 100 companies, 37 of them were on the moon. It's more than one would find in London or New York. The number of companies abandoning Earth and setting up their main offices here were great, and the number that wanted to strike it big was even greater. New frontiers gathered up the brightest of folks. In this era, as long as you had a talented mind and a net connection, you could come out on top. The moon was different from the Earth, where everything the eye could see had been developed owing to a long history, and old geezers wielded immense power sitting high upon their thrones. Some random country couldn't monopolize power here, and because of the nuclear crisis, countries everywhere shied away from the bomb. Thus, the moon was literally an empty place with no external annoyances. Even placing second or third in a race to come here would still be more than enough for someone to become a key figure in the city. Though their footprints were no longer displayed along with the others in the Sea of Tranquility Memorial Hall, without a doubt they stood on the forefront of humanity. For example, there was a bronze bust in front of the central entrance of Central City. The model of this overly serious-faced statue that seems to look down on pedestrians was E.J. Rockberg, who people said would have simply ended up as an excellent banker had he stayed on Earth. Right now, he was the CEO of a top-class investment bank here on the moon at merely 29. He got involved in investing in the lunar development train. In those days, he worked vigorously in lunar development, which few people regarded with much interest as he gambled upon mankind's career and everything he had. That got the ball rolling. On Earth, stories were told about how he built the city from nothing, although many key figures will say that very few people understood what that really meant. It's just that they rode the wave well, they said. I supported these sentiments, even though everyone knew that how they all approached it was less than ideal. At any rate, even though my parents came to the moon at the same time that E.J. Rockberg did, it was evident in the difference in income levels. They worked at leveling the rock to put in soil for the growing and harvesting of crops. Was that not a job from trillions of years before? And on that note, It would have been easier to just have done that back on Earth. That was why I made sure to remind myself this sometimes by coming all the way out to Noon City by train. Particularly, it was a place that those with little training or education would oftentimes find their big break in the city. If you left the sit, if you left the station and headed in the opposite direction of the plaza, right before your eyes was a path on the right-hand side of the towering building of the lunar government. Of course, I suck at reading. Among the many glass-filled buildings in Noon City, there were many that were built using material cut from dark rock. Because of that, they looked plain at first glance. But in my opinion, there's something that gives off an intimidating air, like something with an unequally powerful gravitational pull. That was the financial district, where banks and investment banks set up shop. Pointing to the street was a simple sign that said Strong Schrodinger Street or whatever. And there next to it was this bronze statue of a small cat. Aw, ain't that adorable? The cat had a sly expression in his eyes as it lay sprawled with one foot on a single gold plate. Engraved on the gold plate was this: "You can't know the outcome until you open the box." I thought that was this was the most I thought that well I thought that this was the most appropriate for the financial district. Although I hadn't succumbed to any religious beliefs here on the moon, I saw nothing wrong with petting the cat for good luck. I pet the cat on his head and ran my finger along the outline of the gold plate. You can't know the outcome until you open the box. I came here for the sake of telling myself these words. There were many people who went from being mere errand runners to becoming the masters of the giant buildings that line these streets. I literally came to recharge my spirits here. Schrodinger Street on the weekend was pretty much filled with tourists like me. There were only a few taxis running around, not to mention the total lack of black in luxury cars. You could see busy-looking people in suits, but the security guards in front of the 5-meter front entrances to buildings were yawning out of boredom. There was a hot dog stand along the road. It was so famous that people ranging from hotshot bankers and traders making $1 million a month to the 6-mile-an-hour mailmen would all congregate and eat there. I heard that it was great being able to get your dog 10 seconds after ordering and then eat it with one hand. People who would go to burger joints to eat a meal were considered second rate, and people who go buy boxed lunches were just laughing stocks. Thus, being caught up in the flow of walking along this street, I bought a hot dog. Working on the day off, the vendor said something along those lines and placed a fat sausage in the bun. I didn't even think about replying along the lines of, "Don't treat me like a fool. I at least have a stable income." Being treated as one of the regulars here filled me with joy. To me, making money was a means and not an end. However, after thinking long and hard about it, the fastest way to get rich had to be here. When I had come to that decision, I felt a great reverence for the people at the head of the pack here. And with that, I realized that I actually did have a bit of fanboyism in me. So I thanked the guy, paid my respects to the people passing by, and walked off more fidgety than usual. The main offices of E.J. Rockberg, with top-tier investment banks like Hollard Bros. And Platina Smith not far behind, established their massive buildings here. In order to make the most efficient use of space, Newton City was divided into 3 levels. They were the underground level, the above ground level, and the sky level. I was currently in the sky level, and the main entrances for all the buildings were here. Below this were related companies and rented out office space. The underground and above ground level portions of the buildings on Schrodinger Street were filled with countless funds and consulting agencies. While walking around eating my hot dog, I could occasionally come across narrow and compact buildings with gilded signs and atriums adorned with chandeliers and paintings. There weren't places where money exchanged hands, but rather places where those with enormous sums of money obtained official legal guarantees. Top-class law firms, accounting firms, and government outlets resided here. After walking a bit more, I arrived at an intersection. In front of me was a strangely shaped edifice that reminded me of the Colosseum in Rome. The entrance was dozens of floors above the pavement, and the stairs leading up to it formed its own plaza. It was such a special place that it was allowed to use up this much space, occupying the intersection between Schrödinger Street and Bit Street, which was made up of the software and media companies. The Lunar United Stock Exchange could be called the city's source of wealth. It was a place where stocks from companies all over the world, not just from the moon, were traded. It was the pride of the world, combined with various future markets. Trillions of mules exchanged hands every day. There were a lot of tourists and a lot of people crowded around the standard bronze statue at the entrance taking pictures. Huh, ain't that a good sighting right there? You could say that this was the pinnacle of capitalism and humanity's expansion. Well, that depends. The entrance was wedged between giant screens displaying market information 24 hours a day. Currently airing was a discussion between the vice manager of the Lunar Central Park and the famous CEO of Platina, Smith, on the relaxation of regulations. Both of them were in their mid 40s and could be considered quite young by Earth standards. On the moon, someone in their mid 40s would be considered elderly, although these two were still full of confidence and energy. Well, they could be in their late 30s or younger. Who knows? I leaned against the giant steps of the stock exchange and ate the rest of my hot dog slowly. Everything here was big, vast, and solid. Being a little brat not even worth a scrap of tissue, buying a hot dog was the most that I could do here. However, I'll use the one computer in my bag to make money, and eventually become one of the major players here. That was much more than the first step in achieving my dream, but attaching specific milestones to my goal made me think of how rash it was. However, there were many people who managed to pull it off in the past, thus there shouldn't be any reason I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be able to understand without looking with eyes wide open. The CEO of Platina Smith, who was talking on the screen, had a yearly salary of 37 million mules, being the highest amongst all the major enterprises here in Schrödinger Street. Normal people would be quite satisfied at making 2 million mules over their lifetime, so no one would disagree with that. With this yearly salary. No one would disagree that this yearly salary was monstrous. However, there were also many people who made at least a billion mules a year working in these offices. These were hotshots whose salaries definitely had teeth to them, and they made tons of money using their expertise and behaved almost like lone wolves. These were the people I looked up to in adoration, or idolizing in that matter, since I had neither a real educational background nor a financial backer. My ambitions had still not been fulfilled, so I could only watch them here, but eventually I would stand shoulder to shoulder with them as either rivals or comrades, instead of looking at them from a distance. They were unmistakably billionaires, holding on to the majority of the wealth in this world. Money. Just money. The object of my unbearable desires circulated here like a whirlpool. I squashed the hot dog wrapper and stood up impatiently. Time to head back and look for more money-giving trees. And eventually, I would become someone who would be acknowledged here. And then after that, while on the train, I fixed my hold on my bag while staring at the giant panoply of Newton City's receding buildings. Alright, that was quite the intro right there. Now, how long was I been recording? Only 16 minutes. Oh. Well, hmm. Might as well continue a little bit. As expected, visiting Noon City had replenished my reserves after they had been worn down by a week of trading. Paying no heed to the temptations of consumerism found in the bustling streets, I headed straight back to the church. The scenery changed so much that it appeared as if I was no longer on the same lunar surface. Even now, I started seeing more and more buildings on the verge of collapsing. There were people draping fishing lines into the canals and people growing their own food to cut costs. There were people selling steamed buns, people resurfacing knives, and even people repairing shoes on contract. It was a place filled with bustling life, far removed from the realm of high profits. Clicking my tongue at no one in particular, I jumped past throngs of buildings while making my way back. While getting yelled at by an old fellow, I jumped off the rooftop of a four-story building and flew into the air. I could see the Lunar Chinese restaurant off in the distance. Looking around, I could also see the dirty building-lined street that the Big Bold Cafe was on, as well as my favorite tunnel that opened out into the hill. However, it was impossible to stay in the air forever, thus, I descended gradually with a gravity 1/6 that of Earth's, tugging at me. I absorbed my inertia by bending my knees, then flew up for one last time to cover more ground. It's not like I could do this outside of paths with few people passing by. Depending on the circumstances, I could get pursued by police on grounds of dangerous behavior. However, this speeding sensation was simply unbearably awesome. It was totally suited for me, having just been rejuvenated by Newton City. Well, it's time to get cranking and look for stocks that would bring me the money. And the moment I opened the door and walked in, no, stop! A shrill voice resounded in the air. For a second, I wondered if I had waltzed into the wrong church, but it didn't seem to be the case. I could still hear the voice. No, stop, stop it. It sounded like it was coming from the halls of the main building. My mind spun in circles for a few seconds, then cleared up immediately. A burglar? And the voice was Hagana? Even though she was a damn cheeky and arrogant woman, she was still a woman. Well, no shit. I jumped off the back of a row of pews, flew over them, and dashed down the hall. I heard her shriek and the sound of something getting flipped over. I opened the half-closed door that led to the living room, threw off my backpack, and made a tight fist. Ugh. By now, my head was swimming in adrenaline, and my body was fully primed for battle. The only thought in my head was a voice I had heard from a guerrilla fighter from the Caucasus region who had said that yelling when jumping into a situation had a negative effect. Rushing in grabbed people's attention easily. However, if you could drop down right away, you disappear from their sight and approach your target swiftly. Then, once you were within range, you get up in one go and apply overwhelming force. If your opponent was armed with a gun, just jump off to the side. He wouldn't be able to hit you. If he wielded a blade, just go straight for him. It's not as scary as you think. Now if he's unarmed, just do whatever. I aimed at the dude who had just trashed the room and took a swing at him with my fist. I planted my feet with all my strength to increasing the friction, increasing my effective mass and thus the power of my punch. As long as your mass was low, the power of your attack would only be what Newton's third law gave you. Damn! My punch made a clean hit on my opponent. There's no punch effect? No sound effect or anything? My punch made a clean hit on my opponent, who had just turned towards me in surprise. With a nice sounding smack, the punch went through unhindered. That seemed to be enough. I got pulled along by the inertia of my punch, and by the time I stopped spinning on my other foot, my opponent spun around awkwardly and collapsed right there. He wasn't passed out, although he might have gotten a concussion. His eyes were zoned out and his hands, which looked like they were trying to grab onto something, were trembling and stiff. Preparing myself to kick him into the air at a moment's notice, I called out to Hagana without averting my gaze one bit. You okay? In the corner of my eyes, I could sort of make out a figure clad entirely in black. It was Hagana. she was standing motionless and silent, stuck against the wall. No audible reply came back. However, she was silent not because of the usual arrogance factor, but because she was simply unable to speak. The man grabbed onto the fallen sofa with one hand and tried to prop himself back up somewhat, and I grabbed that hand and twisted it upwards. I squeezed the bony part of his wrist and twisted it upwards and outwards. His body fell over easily, and the extreme pain made the intruder's thoughts quite clear. Hey, what are you? Those were my words after I rotated his arm behind his back, putting me in a position to let me apply additional pressure at any time. This guy was a middle-aged man about the same height as me, and he had a grimy appearance as well as frizzy hair that was mostly thinned out. He looked like quite a crafty guy. I looked past the man. I looked past the man at Hagana. It didn't look like he had assaulted her or anything. The only thing I could see was that the corners of her damn cheeky eyes had gotten red, and that her hands were trembling a bit. If you don't answer properly, I'll kill you. Even if you remain silent, I'll kill you. I knew many deserted lots, and I also knew ruffians who came from war-torn regions on Earth. In a place where there was a possibility of maybe just one murder a year, my threat probably sounded like a child's bluff. However, that appraisal depended on the circumstances. The man I had subdued pretty much instantaneously let out a hoarse shriek. I twisted his arm lightly and asked him again, "What are you, a burglar? Did you know that it's okay to punish a burglar by killing him?" I... This time his shriek was quite clear. "Wait, please wait. Don't kill me. That'll depend on the circumstances. What's with the mess in this room? Enlighten me." I twisted his arm some more and he let out a squeal. I knew that I managed to make Hagana cower in fear. She was surprisingly feminine and totally out of it. "It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I'm not a burglar. No way." "So then what are you?" I'd hardly expect some neighbor to come over for tea and then get angry enough to flip over a sofa, send a table flying with a kick and rip out the carpet. The room really did look that way, like a building marked for demolition. Furthermore, I myself heard Hagana shouting for him to stop. And also, her hand was trembling. "Well, but it wasn't my fault. It's her. It's her fault." "Oh yeah? Well, aren't you the self-righteous burglar?" Like I said, I'm not a burglar, it's true. I'm a debt collector. A debt collector." "Debt collector?" "That's right. I came to collect some owed money. It's just my job." I didn't think he was lying, but I decided to look over at Hagana anyway. After Hagana stared at the suffering man, she noticed my gaze and turned towards me in surprise. "Is that the case?" When asked, she paused for a second and then nodded. I clicked my tongue and let the man go. Well, that was a very intense fight right there. Just grabbing the shit out of the dude. He just picked up the dog and choked him and he bit the shit out of the man. But yeah, I'm just gonna end this here for now. So, next part, we'll see how this one ends out. So, like, comment, and subscribe, and see you later, I guess. Have a good one.